if you could live forever, would you?
Yes.
Okay, we're
Well,
done
you
on
have
the
to
interview.
finish the sentence.
Yes. No. Okay. Sure. That's an attractive idea, but the way I look at it is the knowledge that I'm going to die that creates the focus that I bring to being alive. The urgency of accomplishment, the need to express love now, not later. If we live forever, why ever even get out of bed in the morning? Because you always have tomorrow. That's not the kind of life I want to lead.
But why don't you fear not being around?
I fear living a life where I could have accomplished something and didn't. That's what I fear. I don't fear death.
You don't fear the unknown.
I love the unknown. I love the. You know what I want on my tombstone? My sister has this in her notes, just in case I can't tell anyone after I die. On my tombstone, a quote from Horace Mann, great educator. Be ashamed to die until you have scored some victory for humanity.
Hello and welcome to all my Hexicans. Today I have a very special guest, Tom Peter Gillespie. He made the documentary Hexicans and the Time Value of Money. It came out about a month ago and that has totally changed my view on crypto entirely. And it is probably not what you think. It's probably not what Tom Peter Gillespie had intended, but it did it so anyways. I thought it was a brilliant documentary. Very funny, really informative, and it really deep dived into the topic, is HEX a scam or not? And all of those questions we will today ask Tom Peter Gillespie himself. But first, I want to bring up a screen share. Guys, do me a favor, retweet this post. I've put it into the video description and also into the chat. So if you could help spread the message, that would be wonderful. And like I said, the documentary came out 1 month ago. It was brilliant. I laughed so much. And of course, I had to do a reaction video. And here on my YouTube channel, abit_hex, here you will find it already, 1 hour deep dive reaction video of me where I explained what I found so brilliant. And today, obviously, it is not about me that much. It is more about Tom Peter Gillespie and the documentary Hexicans and the Time Value of Money. And in order to follow along, go to the video description here. Here you find the links that you need to actually find the documentary, to find all the trailers, to find what Tom Peter Gillespie is doing on Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. So with no further ado, let's bring him up. Let's ask him all the hard questions and let's ask him what has he found out about HEX being a scam or not. Hey, Tom, how's it going? Thanks for being here.
G'day, mate. Thank you very much for the invitation.
So, Tom,
very much appreciated.
Thanks for doing this. Thanks for doing this brilliant documentary. I believe all the Hexicans have enjoyed it so much. And since it has changed my worldview on crypto so much, I want to help you promote it as much as possible and bring as many Hexicans as long as possible. And then at the end, I will tell you exactly what has changed in my view when I watched this documentary. So, Tom, I have a lot of questions loaded up for you. But first, before we start, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I'm Tom Gillespie, Tom Peter Gillespie, actually, but I come from Sydney, Australia. I grew up on the west side, though, the west coast, just south of Perth. And, you know, I got my start in the finance industry in the early 90s in the main street of Sydney, basically. I was running something, you know, quite similar to what you might see in the Wolf of Wall Street movie with John Belfort. And so a lot of penny stock activities, but in the, mainly in the Australian markets, there's a lot of similarities between Aussie and the US actually. And I think it was 2017, I was in Bali with my chick, and, we were getting a piranha football. And this local chap, he really, he suggested that I pay in something called Bitcoin. And that was my first exposure to cryptocurrency. And I told him to, I laughed at him and I said, bloody hell are you on about? But after that interaction, I went ahead and I looked a little further at Bitcoin, dug a little bit deeper, had a little bit of a play. And ultimately, I put a little bit of a wager in there. Didn't work out very well. And after that, I became, a little bit like what you see the response from Peter Schiff regarding cryptocurrency. I think it's all, at that point, I thought it was all just Ponzi-nomics and, musical chairs for traders, similar like what we did in the penny stock era. And then, fast forward a few years, I think it was 2019, my brother Timmy, his son, basically got enthralled with this influencer called Bitman360. And those of you that have seen the fake influencer will know what I'm talking about. But Bitman360 was a big crypto influencer in the scooter coin project that was quite, it was quite popular back then. And he wanted to go all in on this this device called the Buttercup. It was the Buttercup 3 at that stage. He was on the third iteration of that. And it was essentially a device that you connect to your scooter, and every time you go around to the skate park on your scooter, it would be generating scooter coins. And if you did, say, a tail whip or a backflip or whatever they do on their fucking scooters at the park, you would earn like bonus scooter coin. I thought this was an interesting sort of application of the cryptocurrency technology. And so I gave my brother, I loaned my brother a substantial amount of money for his kid to get into that space. And that, again, didn't turn out very well for me. But the icing, on the shining star of that story is that I actually got to make my first crypto investigation titled The Fake Influencer that came out in 2021. So there was something good to, some value was extracted out of that monumentally shit investment into the Buttercup 3 device, which I believe Bitman360 is still working on to this day, actually, which is just mind-boggling. Some people can't give up on their dreams, right?
Well, this just shows that the crypto space is full of a cesspool of scammers, basically, right? There are thousands cryptocurrencies. Some are good, like Bitcoin, Ethereum, maybe like HEX, and some are bad. And you wanted, with your investigation, look into if HEX is a Ponzi or a scam or not. And behind you, there is the art of your cover from the documentary, and it has yourself in there as well. It has Richard Hart and all the hexagons, and I even see myself in the top right corner here, Avid_hex. So my first question for you is, what was your experience, first of all, staking HEX and also interacting with the hexagon community?
Yeah, so the initial, when I put out a short video introducing myself and telling the hexagons what I was up to from my garden, and the initial reaction was very positive, actually, very warm, welcoming, and it was almost like, an invitation, come and do that, come and investigate us, because, they felt so strongly about their product, or Richard's product, that, I wouldn't be able to find any flaws in it. And so the initial reaction was very warm. There was a few, maybe just a handful of people that weren't very happy. I guess they thought I would interfere with their holdings, the value of their holdings somehow through my investigation. But I mean, if you watch the film, you'll see what happened to the value of my own bags over that period. But yeah, no, generally a very, very warm, welcoming, nice community. Majority of people actually appeared to be quite, creative as well. There was almost immediately some memes generated of myself in the wrestling ring with Richard Hart, these GIFs. And I thought, wow, that's fantastic. I've already, I felt like this is a very warm welcome. They've made GIFs of myself getting beaten up in the wrestling ring by their founder, the King, Richard. So, I think that it was an okay reception.
And to give everybody a gist of what you were talking about, let's play the first trailer of the first episode. It's called Florida Man. It's going to be 2 minutes, guys. Stay with us. It's going to be a really interesting show today.
Are you just trolling everyone? I mean, you're scamming everyone. Let's not pretend it's anything else. Okay. I mean, this is a scam.
The HEX community really, they're just such a positive community in my opinion. And I've just noticed that they really uplift everyone and focus on the positives of other people. And it's such an enthusiastic and talented community.
Richard, as a public figure, is the face of HEX. He's the guy who came up with the idea. But at the same time, he talks about how the fact there's no admin key. It's an immutable contract. It lives in the Ethereum blockchain. So there's nothing that Richard can do to affect my account because I hold my private key.
The thing about Richard, he's a really strong character. He listens to what you got to say and he'll basically say, "You finished?" And he'll answer you. He'll say, "Well, this is why it's not a scam. This is why it's not a Ponzi. This is why it's not a pyramid. Take it or leave it." He's got things on his website, basically, that's a whole section under scams.
You're promoting something that you actually believe in and is actually working. And when you know Richard, you see he's like a good person, genuinely wants to help people. And when everyone else is calling it a scam and you're trying to, onboard your friends and family and they don't really want to hear about it, like that sucks because they're missing out on such a good opportunity.
What separated it from buying anything else, because I actually was buying stuff, was that everyone was calling it a scam. And, if you've seen other, what they call shitcoins, a lot of people call it a scam or call it the greatest thing ever.
The people who understand the system, they understand that it doesn't really matter what happens. The T-share price will go up regardless of anything.
Do whatever you think is best for you. I built something amazing, okay? If you think it's amazing, come play along.
He explained the concept of HEX to me and urged me to purchase it as a friend. And I called it the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard in my entire life.
I can only do the best I can do, right? I show you the data, I show you the facts, I present you the real world. You do your own computation.
So here in this trailer, we have seen a lot of information already what the documentary is about. And I've written down some keywords that we will discuss today in our stream. For example, Eric Wall, he's the main critic of HEX, or he became the main critic of HEX, and you interviewed him. Really, really interesting. Then later on, we will dive deep into the topic of narratives. Obviously, you want to find out if Richard Hart is a scammer. So we have to ask you the question, what you have learned about Richard Hart. And then one of the main parts was really decentralization and what it's all about. And it's actually really hard to measure if it is decentralized or not. And there was one of the main parts what really has shifted my thinking of cryptocurrency and entirely. But here you have encountered with the Hexican community basically for the first time. And I bet in the past on ScooterCon, for example, you maybe have seen similar things also with Bitcoin people, with Ethereum people. There is something out there called maximalism. And have you found differences between ScooterCoin maximalism, Bitcoin maximalism, and HEX maximalism?
It's a bloody good question, mate. And I think maximalism in crypto is often used as a vehicle to sort of generate some sort of FUD, right? So there are those people that are, claim to be maxis, but I'm not entirely convinced that they are. But they feel it necessary to defend a certain project over a certain period of time for whatever reason, because they have some speculation. For example, I just saw today that this guy, he was mentioned in the documentary as well, Ivan on Tech. He's just popped up out of nowhere, right? I spent nearly a year and a half with the Hexicans. I didn't see that cunt anywhere on my journey. Although, in my research, my post-production, when I was collecting all my B-roll and everything, I came across him and I saw there was some interactions that happened a few years back. He's just popped up today or yesterday. Suddenly he's talking about HEX again. So he's had a hiatus for a few years, and it's questionable. Okay, why do certain individuals decide when and what projects to defend, or not necessarily defend, but start to put attention on at what time, right? What do they believe is about to happen? Why do they wish to be associated with such things? And is it important for them to be viewed as a maxi in that regard? So to answer your question, there is no difference. The capacity of maxis is identical across all projects. It's only the question of why now, and for how long are they going to claim to be this maxi? Now, obviously, you have this whole other category, which applies to the Bitcoin maxis, I guess, and those guys genuinely, I think, are maximalists because Bitcoin was the first cunt out the door. They believe that any interference with the Satoshi's vision of how things should go for a peer-to-peer monetary value exchange world, cannot be improved on. It's already complete. It's perfect. Anything else additional on top is going to fuck it up. Those people definitely exist, but they're a different category to what you see in Scooter Coin or other maximalist communities.
So you maybe don't know, but I have been a former maximalist, and you, especially with your documentary, has changed that. Eric Wall was there to be shown. We will talk about him at the end of our interview today, because he was really the key figure who changed my viewpoint on being a maximalist or not. So I have been a maximalist. I'm not anymore. I opened my eyes, and this is thanks to you, Tom. So before we go into the next clip, what were some key moments in your investigation? It was going on for 1 year. And can you remember some key moments for you? Where have you learned some really interesting things?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a couple of things tied to Richard himself that have stuck with me that he has said. And then there are some things related to this journey into the heart of the concept of decentralization. So I think Richard, some things that have stuck with me that Richard have said that actually make some sense are this idea that you just collect free coins where you can and just stash them because you never know. I think that makes sense actually, and arguably I've done that. If you watch the series, you'll see I picked up some Hedron, some Doge Pulse, I think it is, and some other colloquially known shit coins that it doesn't cost me anything to have them sit there, and you never know what might happen. So, and also, Richard knows a lot about the crypto scamdemic, and you may have seen my first interview with him at the time when I was producing The Fakefluencer back in 2020, and I interviewed with Richard about the crypto scamdemic. And that interview, I think that's probably one of the best interviews I've ever done in terms of harvesting proper, useful insights into how the crypto economy works. So I'm grateful to him, grateful to Richard for that. But the key moments, I think, in terms of what was the broader message of the documentary miniseries, of course, there was the constant failure to find Richard, but there was also, if you watched till the end, you'll see that there was an unraveling of this value proposition that everybody, pumps hard in crypto of decentralization, and actually what are the realities of a project being decentralized versus the claim that they are decentralized right now, as in opposed to probably they'll be decentralized somewhere down the line in the future. Now, this shit happens all the time in the metaverse. It's standard fucking issue in the metaverse, but out here in the real world, we still have to grapple with the realities of regulation and what have you. I don't think the metaverse has any regulation yet. And there's people doing exactly the same behaviors in there already, as you would have seen from my visit to both Cryptopia and HEX City.
So metaverse is also something that we will discuss right after the next clip. I have more questions for you. So let's watch the second episode, the trailer of the second episode.
What is a god whale?
Everything is motherfucking possible.
What is WAGMI?
We have no idea.
I am wondering why people are so worried about the OA.
Tomo, mate, we have some serious competition here.
I'll have to go into some detail around how I was able to miss the best performing asset of the year, which is HEX.
I actually understand Tom Gillespie's position, right?
No, we have to go. We have
Tom Gillespie here. I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about decentralization.
Yeah, I've got a... Are we on camera right now?
Camera right now.
Richard wanted to work with us, but at that point in time, it was just not the right time. But yes, I'm familiar with Richard and HEX.
It's like, it is a Ponzi, but it is a self-aware Ponzi.
If anything, honestly, it's probably going to get worse before it gets better.
If you're going to a circus, you expect to see clowns. But not everybody in attendance at that circus is necessarily a clown.
It's a way to mask my identity. So now it's sort of a privacy thing.
A lot of people are going to get hate and criticism, so it's up to him and his teams to prove whether they have long-term viability or not.
All right, let's run an interview about HEX. Okay, all right.
We made an epic fuck up, basically.
We are limitless!
So with your documentary, Hexicans and the Time Value of Money, you have, at least I had the feeling that you were addressing especially me and also the Hexicans, but this documentary was for everybody who is in crypto. And you were investigating if Hex is a scam and or not. And Richard Hart obviously is a big part of it. So you were on the hunt for him. And everybody who has watched my reaction video already knows that this was my only critique that I had towards the documentary, because it took a while for you to go on a hunt for him in Malta. You were in all those different places and you were never able to find him. So first question in this section, why did you try to make this joke that you are on the hunt for Richard Hart, that you are trying to find him? At one point you were in a place where all the Richards live, for example. So what was the reasoning for that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you pick up intelligence where you can, especially as an independent documentary investigation production journalist, man. So you do what you can, but not always is the intelligence accurate. And so that's what ended up having me in so many, different locations that didn't actually work out. But the reason that I thought it was so bloody important to get Richard on camera, was this constant conversation that goes on about, is Richard the OA? And if he is, I personally had the feeling that if I could get him in front of the camera and sit him down in real, IRL, I could get him to confess to that if it was true. Now, that didn't actually happen, but we did briefly meet in Hexaco City in the metaverse, but unfortunately he had some issues with his avatar. It kept sort of floating up towards the sky. I don't know what was going on there, but I assume he had some issues with his headset. So I wasn't able to conclude that interview, but there was another unpublished interview that happened in Hexaco City, which I could probably publish that as part of the stuff that I'm doing with the bit joinery, which I'd very much like to touch on that in this stream actually, because that's the way forward into the future for the next investigations in terms of how they're going to be resourced. But yeah, so essentially to answer your question, I felt it fundamentally important to get Richard on camera, a little bit like those guys from the other documentary, the German guys. Or was that you?
Exactly, that was me. So
yeah, you managed to get him on camera. You did an interview with him, right?
That was not me. It was my teammate who was on the meetups with Richard Hart. What I did was I texted you this year on Twitter where I said, "Hi Tom, I heard you are a Hexagon now. Congratulations." This was like before your documentary. Since you're filming a documentary on Hex, I want to invite you to one of our exclusive OG meetups. This time we got a house in Miami Beach and 2 yachts. We organized these meetups to talk about the future of Hex, Pulse Chain, and Pulse X. Actually, there are 3 events you can attend, and so on and so on. And here's a picture of the event. And now Tom just dropped off. Here you see my crew. You see also the Hexagons, and this would have been the event that I invited Tom Peter Gillespie. I hope he jumps in again in a couple of seconds. So I invited him there and he did not come. Unfortunately, he was stuck in Europe at this time. And here we have him back again. So you were not able to come because you were stuck in Europe. This would have been your chance to really meet the Hexagons. Richard, unfortunately, was not there. I just wanted to bring that up. I thought that was pretty funny. And now he dropped out again. Maybe he has an unstable internet connection. The next questions in this segment is all about narratives, because narrative is something that I learned in this documentary is really important when it comes about crypto, because in my view, and Richard has said something similar in the past, crypto is all a narrative. And Tom, Peter Gillespie, you said in the documentary that RH has figured out a way to use the scam narrative to his advantage. Can you maybe elaborate on that? What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so just forgive me as well for dropping out there. It might happen again. I don't know why. But it happened 3 times in a row just then, so fuck knows what's going on. But yeah, the scam narrative is what happened. What I believe happened with, for example, if you go to hex.com, I think it is the website, you'll see there's a whole page dedicated to the scam side of things, because essentially that's what needs to be addressed immediately in order to build trust, right? When it's like when you meet a new Sheila, and you want to know, is this chick just gonna take me for a ride, make me go out, take her out to restaurants, spend all the money on her, and then she's just gonna fuck off? How do you build trust quickly, instantly through digital, through websites essentially? So he's put those things in place, but what he's also done, I assume it's top down, is he's basically passed on some instructions to the Hexagons that most people will search for Hex via the criteria, or the query is Hex a scam. So essentially what he needed to do was figure out a way to fucking own the traffic that came through that query. And what happens then is he can basically, or Hexagons or the, Hex Maxis, whatever you want to fucking call them, can make sure that all the people that are the doubters, or not necessarily haters, but they're on the fringes of the doubting whether or not this thing is for real or not, get kind of funneled into a spot where they, where the Hex narrative can kind of come into its own and be sort of amplified. And this is very, very easy to prove. All you have to do is go to YouTube, logged out, sign out of YouTube, go on whatever it's called, incognito mode, and go, right, Hex is a scam. And all the videos you'll see there are from Hexkins. And I've done this myself. And I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense, right? If you think your project is legit, but you want other people to think it's legit that probably don't think it is, then you need to own that side of the story as well. Especially, again, when it comes to building trust through digital platforms, websites, social media, etc. You can't just constantly push back on this sort of doubt. You have to embrace it, essentially. And I think that's quite normal in the crypto economy. Arguably, it's very normal in the fashion world as well, where obviously a lot of scams happen in fashion, where people order, nice Versace pants, and they don't arrive for whatever reason. They end up in Bulgaria and they're the wrong size and the wrong color. These things happen. So I hope that addresses your question.
Oh yeah. So I think how it came about 3 years ago when Hex came out, all the Bitcoin people, all the Ethereum people, they said Hex is a scam. Everybody was really outraged that Hex was giving free coins to the people, and those people then got rich on it. And so everybody was saying it was a scam, to a point where Richard said, hey, let's put it on our site. And I think it was Eric Wall who said in your documentary that Richard is so charismatic. He wants the people to look for Hex, maybe even look up, like you said, is Hex a scam or not? And then with his charismatic, with his information, with his presence, he's then convincing the people to look into Hex and then maybe even purchase Hex. And this is all what crypto is. It is all just a narrative, and this section is all about narrative. And the narrative that has formed for me, what I have realized is Richard Hart has understood the 3 most important things in crypto, which is, first of all, that crypto people buy cryptocurrencies, people stake or hold on to the cryptocurrency, and then the third part is that the community talks about the cryptocurrency, because that will then bring adoption. So let me ask you the next question. In your opinion, are there some positive or negative narratives about Hex specifically or in general in crypto?
Sorry, can you rephrase that?
So there are a lot of narratives out there, right? That Bitcoin is digital money, for example, and then this narrative completely failed. It became another narrative that it's store of value. So the narrative is really just everything that represents crypto. Do you know some narratives about Hex? Do you know any other narratives about crypto in general?
I mean, yeah, there's obviously different parties within a community that gather around a coin that want to basically amplify different narratives for whatever reason. So there's no unified narrative. I mean, how do you move this idea that Bitcoin, Satoshi's vision, so I think that it was even called Satoshi vision, this idea of peer-to-peer cash kind of branched off from the original. No, sorry, it was the other way around, right? So the original concept was peer-to-peer cash, and then there was this, no, it's a store of value, and then you got Bitcoin Gold, I think, and then Bitcoin Satoshi went in the other direction. And you had a fork, and you can fork, as far as I understand, you can fork infinitely, right? So there's probably 25 different types of Bitcoin out there already, but there's always going to be an original. So regardless of what segment of a community forks a coin or tries to improve on it in any such way, or instill some sort of belief structure, ideological structure upon it is, well, as we've seen a number of times before, doomed to fail, right? I'm thinking of Ethereum Classic. I did some research into Ethereum Classic. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It was a fork of Ethereum back in, I think it's 2016, maybe earlier. And this was essentially a bunch of guys in Ethereum saying, no, we've lost our way. Ethereum's lost its way. We need to get back to the roots, right? And that's why we're going to fork it and call it Ethereum Classic. Now, fuck knows what that segment of the community were actually after. They probably just were trying to, cash in, I guess. Just cash in, quick cash in. Because I don't think Ethereum Classic is still around now. Maybe it is. But they claimed to uphold some sort of ideological reasoning associated with Vitalik's vision of what Ethereum was. But as soon as they deviated from the original fork, they suddenly were out there on their own, right? And it really, I think it's one of the most interesting things about blockchain, because it really puts people in their place, right? It's like, okay, you guys can fuck off and go in this direction because you believe this and that and the other. But we're going to, us guys, us OGs are going to continue on the original chain. And we, 99% of the time, whenever you see this, it seems like everybody just wants to stay on the original chain. So any deviation, regardless if it's supposed to tap into this fundamental value proposition that the founder had, initially, is it gets lost somewhere in that transition.
Exactly, it gets lost and it forks, and nobody knows what was the initial ethos anymore. And that's why I have realized the only thing that matters in cryptocurrency is that we are all getting rich, that we are all getting financially free. And this is what happened exactly to me. 3 years ago, I was living in a basement for 1 year. I knew when I buy HEX, then I have the hope, because at one day the price will probably go up and I will find financial freedom. And this is the only thing that matters in crypto. It's like really not about the vision. It's not about the blockchain. It's not about the technology. It's just about the hope of the people that the price will go up and they will find financial freedom. So you were
But that said, I would like to just touch on the fact that HEX was called Bitcoin HEX originally when Richard went out to all the Bitcoiners and said, hey, drop your Bitcoin address in here and you'll have a claim on HEX in the future. It was called Bitcoin HEX at that time, so it could have easily been interpreted by a lot of people, a lot of Bitcoin holders at that time as a type of fork, right? Or a new interpretation of the initial value proposition by Satoshi Nakamoto. And I think if you fast forward to from that point a few years, you'll see why, or you'll start to understand why Bitcoiners and other fellas despise Richard or his presence.
I think you got it a little bit wrong here. This is probably what the people have told you. When HEX came out on December 3rd, 2019, it was called HEX. Maybe it was in the months before when Richard Hart did the interview with Eric Wall, for example, or when Richard went to the Bitcoin conference and he asked all the other people in Bitcoin to sit down with him to do an interview that he can pitch HEX and they will give them the idea. Eric Wall was talking about this specific. Maybe that's when HEX was in development, that the working title was Bitcoin HEX, because it was intended to be a better Bitcoin. But then when HEX launched, again on December 3rd, 2019, it was definitely called HEX, and it's not like the narrative has changed. Richard Hart said that HEX will do 10,000x in 2 years, and it really, really did that. And not because it was the Bitcoin narrative, because I think the game theory, the tokenomics, the technology is just better. So that's why people bought it. That's why people had so much trust and staked it. But then at the end, it is really the community that talked about it so much that more and more people got into HEX, looked into it, bought into it. And later on, we will also talk about something that is called a God whale. This is also something that you dive deep into. in your documentation. But at the end, you were on the hunt for Richard Hart. You wanted to find out who is this guy. You did all your research. So I have to ask you the question. Describe Richard Hart a little bit from what you have seen, what you have learned about Richard Hart.
Okay. I think Richard Hart is, well, he makes big claims about being Mensa, right? So he's an intelligent man. He has a history of successful entrepreneurship through his so-called Spam King business in Panama. I think he understands the digital economy more than most people, and like I say, has had some successes. Although I can imagine there's an immense amount of pressure upon him, considering what he's put out into the world already and what he is promising to put out in the world with Pulse Chain in the future. So I just, you try to imagine what a day in the life would be like for this chap, and I can imagine he probably has zero to little peace. I don't imagine he has much peace, and I think a lot of what you see online, he thinks very long and hard about before posting in order to try to trigger the right responses or the right reactions. So I don't think he does anything impulsively. I think he thinks quite a lot about what he does, and he also realizes that he's operating in a attention economy of which he is competing with many others who are playing exactly by exactly the same rules, essentially. And that, I imagine, that pisses him off as well. But listen, mate, I need to go to the loo. Can I get just a few minutes?
No problem. I will play the next trailer of the episode, so you have 2 minutes and maybe even more. Take your time, no problem at all.
Thank you, mate.
Now, hand back the fucking phone now.
Happy Valentine's Day to Richard Hart.
Oh, you about to make Hexicans mad at me. Richard, come down, mate. Come down from your castle now. $71 billion in crypto has reportedly passed through the blockchain island Malta. Quick question, have you heard of Richard Hart?
He's figured out a way to use the scam narrative in crypto to his advantage. Who's heard of HEX?
The problem with NFTs, though, and one of the could be the Achilles heel, and I don't know if it will be or not, is the self-dealing.
He lives here in Malta. Okay, no problem. Thanks, mate.
I know the girls, not the guys.
Okay. Stop playing King, silly buggers. Fucking hell.
Yeah, I haven't seen another project which has the mechanisms built in to enrich a particular entity as much as HEX does.
Originally, like most people, I was very enthused, and I bought some, and it went up.
It's a joke, and the reason they look at Richard, and Richard can get away with saying he created a better Bitcoin, because he's not mincing words. He'll tell you straight up, this is a pump coin.
Yes, please, if you've seen Tom in Sydney, please do let us know. We are concerned about him. We love him.
Such a funny documentary. I really loved it. In this segment now, we will talk about decentralization. We will talk about the God Whale, the OA, and Richard Hart. And then at the end also, we will talk about NFTs and Metaverse before we then go into the next question. So here you have seen that Tom Peter Gillespie has been in Malta, for example, and there he has read that, oh man, there's so much money going through Malta, so many scams probably. And he's then been on a little conference where he spoke about his documentary Hexicans and the Time Value of Money. There he then met somebody from the NFT world, from the metaverse world, and really the term decentralization came up. And one thing about decentralization that Tom Peter Gillespie was really able to brand into my head was that decentralization is really a spectrum, and normal people like you and me have a really hard time distinguish what is decentralized. Some people would say Bitcoin is decentralized. Some people would say Hex is the most decentralized of it all, and obviously we Hexicans know the reasons for that. And I hope so far you really liked this interview. I have a lot of fun here with Tom Peter Gillespie. I've put up all your comments already on screen. So if you guys have any questions after the fourth segment, we'll put in the best questions from you guys and ask that to Tom. So you guys don't forget to like and subscribe. And in a couple of minutes, when Tom Peter Gillespie is back from taking a loo, I think that's how he called it, we will ask him about decentralization and what he means by it being a spectrum. And after those 3 more questions, then we actually go to the hardest segment where Eric Wall was interviewed, and Tom Peter Gillespie had Eric Wall did a deep dive into the OA, into the blockchain analysis of who holds what coins in the Hex ecosphere. And, somehow Tom Peter Gillespie was able to make Eric Wall look so good that now I like Eric Wall a lot after this interview, after being on this documentary. It was such a great documentary. And somehow he made Eric Wall present it really, really nicely. And what Eric Wall said in the documentary was that Eric Wall became the main critic of Hex. Before Hex launched, Richard Hart went to a lot of conferences and sat down important influencers of the space to ask them what they think about Hex, to give them the idea of what they think. And, that's when Eric Wall said he then realized Richard Hart was using every single one of them for marketing reasons. And we will then later in the fourth segment talk about Eric Wall, decentralization, the guardrail. We'll talk about what is decentralization anyways. I already said it right now that Tom Peter Gillespie, for me, termed the phrase that decentralization is a spectrum, and I want to get into exactly that. So, Tom, let me ask you the next question, because one of the main parts of your documentary was also to figure out what is decentralization. Eric Wall was then later on saying it is actually really hard to prove decentralization if you cannot read code. So one of the key element was what is decentralization? And a major part I learned from you is that the phrase decentralization is a spectrum. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so what I came to understand was in the marketing materials that crypto companies and crypto communities, they like to bandy about this idea of decentralization as a definitive. So it is decentralized is often how it's presented. It's decentralized from day one, which anybody that spends a little bit time closer looking at different projects will realize, okay, the real measure of whether or not a crypto project is a scam or has the potential to do a rug pull or what have you is closely defined, closely associated with this so-called origin address, which all projects have them. They just they have to be birthed from somewhere, someplace, and that's often a small group of software developers with an individual founder at the helm, like Richard. And I think one of the potential pitfalls for newcomers coming into crypto is not realizing that or not understanding that. For example, there is in episode 2, I talked with a bunch of NFT artists who, NFT artists are often young people who have been approached by some older people, usually a gentleman, that wishes to get their artwork onto their platform. And yeah, I highlight that in episode 2, I think, with this NFT artist, where she had coupled up with some platform to distribute her artwork, but didn't really realize that in doing so, she'd introduced a third party into her so-called peer-to-peer relationship with her community or customer for her artwork. So it's twofold, basically. There's the story that projects tell their people in order to onboard them about being decentralized and having there's no sort of unified central failure point, which is as we've come to understand, and I think anybody that watched the documentary will realize that that's not accurate. So then the question becomes, okay, what level of, how decentralized is this project today? How decentralized will it be in 6 months' time? And that all boils down to promises or projections of how things might look in the future, which are they don't always work out, right? Now, I'm not saying that all projects that claim decentralization eventually end up doing a rug. So again, highlighted in the documentary, I think in episode 3, when I was in Malta doing that presentation, people get fucking bored, or they get tired, or they run out of steam, capital, whatever, and they just decide to call it a day, So it's not always ill-intentioned, but it's up to those people that interact with certain projects to understand what level of decentralization the project's at today, and do I trust those people who are claiming that level of decentralization to take the project into a further decentralized realm going forward. And again, that means you have to trust human beings, which are de facto middlemen. So there's the decentralization mythos is exactly that. It's a myth. Now, that said, there are projects. Bitcoin's been around for over 10 years now. I think that's about as decentralized as you can get. But again, that said, introducing god whales who can move markets, arguably moving the price of an asset is not necessarily affecting how decentralized it is, but it is a manipulation that exists in the marketplace, similar in the regular economy, right?
It is very, very similar, exactly. And this is why I want to make a point, or I believe somebody else in the documentary has made the point, that in the beginning, no cryptocurrency is decentralized. It maybe claims so. When Satoshi Nakamoto started Bitcoin, it was centralized. He was mining all the Bitcoin. And then you just introduced the term God whale, and we have something like that in HEX as well. The Genesis whale, who was in the early phase of Ethereum, who has a lot of Ethereum, he bought into HEX as well. He became a big holder. So in aspect of decentralization, please elaborate on the God whale, on the OA, and Richard Hart, because these are the entities basically that hold a lot of coins, and this makes it so called a little bit not decentralized, right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends again at which phase of the project we're at, right? I think Scott Cunningham, who I interviewed in the series as well, mentioned that he bought some HEX at the beginning, but then had to drop out for ethical reasons or something. He mentioned at the beginning it wasn't very decentralized, and then over time it became more and more decentralized. And then, like, how long's HEX been out now? 3-4 years or something. I guess it's much more further along that journey towards decentralization. But there are actors that are more powerful than others that are playing in this playground, if you like. And again, HEX is not unique in that regard, not at all. So the role of the OA, the God whales, depending on the makeup of the project in HEX, for example, it's difficult to determine, but I think I counted maybe at least 12 god whales. And then if you think Richard is a type of god whale or what have you, you start to see the emergence of a similar structure to a regular corporation where you have board members, chairman of the board, blah blah blah. But instead of a registered limited liability corporation, for example, you have this smart contract in which everybody just agrees to abide by the rules of the contract as it stands.
Well, this is now getting really, really deep. But in HEX, we have an inflationary currency that gives out those free, newly printed internet money, right, created out of thin air to the people who believe the most into the cryptocurrency, that stake the most, they will get the most coins. So I think Johnny Chaos also said it, that over time, HEX becomes more and more decentralized. I think that is really important. And you mentioned that you've been in Malta. You were invited to a small crypto conference, and that's where you talked to somebody from the NFT and metaverse space. Before we go into the next segment, which is like a really heavy segment, I wanted to ask you a really easy question, so really short and briefly. What do you think about NFTs and metaverse, and what problems do you encounter in this world?
Yeah, so the thing with NFTs and properties in the metaverse, which are basically an interpretation of NFTs, just a different visualization, is the fact that although you can have just one metaverse world, for example, Decentraland, and then all the assets that can be created within that metaverse, there's nothing stopping anybody from forking that metaverse and doing an entire replication. A little bit like what's happening with Ethereum and Pulse Chain in a sense, because as I understand it, Pulse Chain's bringing over all the ERC20 tokens as well, which is kind of funny to think about, actually. So the idea that you would spend so much time and energy and money building out property in a metaverse that you could just suddenly turn around one day and see, oh fuck, the entire thing's been copy pasted over there, and actually those guys have got a massive budget. They're backed by some government somewhere or whatever, so they've got infinite supply of resources. Suddenly your little metaverse and your little property and investment and what have you is diminished in value overnight. So this idea that there is this infinite value potential attached to both metaverses, properties, and NFTs is a kind of a silly one, to be honest. I personally have felt this with the NFTs that came out with the Fakefluencer, the character cards, and then I had some with Mogul, and then now I've got something else going on for the production. I've been approached by a number of other platforms that take those NFTs. They're on, for example, the ones on Fakefluencer are on HEX blockchain, right? Nobody knows what the fuck HEX blockchain is, apart from gamers. It's big in the gaming thing. So I can just take all those and just put them onto another chain or another platform and launch them, and suddenly I've diminished the value of the other ones on the HEX blockchain. All the HEX, holders of those NFTs are going to be quite pissed off at me. And it doesn't feel very fucking decentralized at all, to be honest.
Well, I think it's funny. You're talking about those NFTs, which are non-fungible token, but then the system just forks, and you will have all your NFTs on Pulse Chain as well. And you're talking about that this diminishes the value of the holders, which I think is the opposite. Actually, it will make the value of the tokens higher, because now you have two of them. And let's see how it will turn out on Pulse Chain. A really, really big experiment that we are running here.
Again, it depends how well resourced the competitor is, right?
And yeah, for sure, a big experiment, and I'm really excited to find out how it all played out. So let's go into the next segment. I will play the 4th episode, and then we will talk about Eric Wall, the guy who has really changed my view on crypto, because there I learned a lot. And then at the end, you also had Ben Goertzel, which then totally blew my brain out. But let's watch the next trailer here.
That's what is shown here. If you wanted to get the...
But that's nothing.
38 billion.
Oh, bit. I mean, yeah, I didn't see the B there. So.
He used to be a kind of a Bitcoin maximalist.
Yes, this is Dixmount. Almost all Richards live here.
He actually really wants people to like him.
We took a camera and he said, I said, I don't know anything about, the only thing that I know is that you said that you were forking Bitcoin.
So in that sense, he kind of made quite of a U-turn.
All right, Hexicans, Tom Gillespie here.
Wait a second, is that him in the window? Zoom into that window. Is that him?
And then he said, I'll explain the project to you and you can tell me your opinion. But that was before I knew that he had like a strategy with this.
Get off my property. Yeah, okay, but... All right, mate, calm down.
Red pants with you. Yeah, I see you, motherfucker.
The degree to which a given blockchain is decentralized is noticed only by a few hardcore geeks, right? Because otherwise in the media universe, everyone throws that term around.
This is like his number one priority, is he wants people to like him.
He wasn't just trying to get my opinion on HEX. He was knowingly trying to get, marketing his project through the opinions of other influential people in the cryptocurrency space.
In some ways, Richard, by having such a large amount of supply, has reintroduced a trust element in a system that is supposed to be a fundamental part of it is trustlessness.
It doesn't have to be one cult for a decentralized network.
It is difficult to prove decentralization if you cannot read code.
But like many other, he's not the only one. There's many other who have done the same. And I guess it's just when the opportunity arises, then some people take the opportunity, some people don't.
Because the Howey test was written back in the God knows when, it doesn't apply, or it needs a refresh, I would say.
We all are actually trying to make cryptocurrency and decentralization, become mainstream, but we can't even get along.
So it was episode 1 and 4 that I have liked the most, and it was because of Eric Wall, for example, that a lot of Hexicans don't like him, but I learned his true side of him, and you have met him. So I wanted to learn a little bit more about Eric Wall. He said that he became the main critic of HEX. He said also that Richard Hart used him for marketing strategies, right? That Richard Hart knows exactly what kind of action would be labeled a scam. I wonder why he still helps to promote HEX, because Eric Wall says it so well. If you only talk about HEX, then people will look into it. Richard Hart is so well versed and so charismatic that then people will buy HEX, and fall into this pitfall. So what is your experience with Eric Wall? Do you think he's a genuine guy? Because I really started to like him.
Yeah, I think you need to see the entire interview, which I'm airdropping to NFT holders, by the way, which I'd like to touch on before we wind this stream up. But I think the actual full interview with Eric it's close to 2 hours long. So there's a lot more there that you don't see in the series. But I can't speak for the guy myself, but I've observed him over time, much like I have the Hexican community and Richard himself, and I can only conclude that he is a Hexican. And yeah, I think he describes the sort of foundational value proposition of HEX in the way in the series when he mentions that there is those that are staked and those that are unstaked, and the smart motherfuckers will have both because they'll benefit on both sides, right? As the value appreciates, they'll benefit from their liquid HEX, and vice versa with their staked HEX through the T-share system. So I think he probably understands HEX more than most, and you just saw the clip there where he had to explain to the board of the hedge fund that he manages why he missed the so-called greatest investment of the year, right? So I can only conclude that the guy's a Mexican, and I assume that playing off the back of the altcoin Slayer brand, which he developed through his investigative work into, what was it called now? IOTA. He basically when we met, he told me that he knocked some $200 million off of their market cap when he published a blog post. I was like, fucking hell, this guy must be, he must have some weight to swing around if he can do that to a project. So the only reason why I imagine, it's like, I saw that he actually took another interview with Richard Hart. It was sometime last year in Stockholm, in Sweden. He met Richard and did an on-stage interview was that your documentary for that documentary?
No, it's called Highest of Stakes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, that's the Canadians. The Canadians. I've spoken with those guys as well. Because there was a few other documentaries. There was mine, then was your guys, the German fellas, and then there was the Highest of Stakes. There was another. I think there was a fourth one as well at the time.
From the UK, I think, the guys that drive the Ferraris on the racetrack.
Yeah. Have any of those others come out yet?
I think I have seen like all of them. So it's 2 or 3 documentaries that came out. None of them is as big as the Highest of Stakes that we believe will one day air maybe on Netflix or something like this. So everybody is really, really excited about that. Tom, the next question is a little bit hard, and that's why maybe you can just briefly touch on it. We talked about decentralization. You did a detailed analysis with Eric Wall about the OA. What have you learned about that?
What have I learned about the OA through Eric Wall? Well, if I go through what Eric's described in our interview, then the OA is Richard, and that seems to be what conclusion Eric's arrived at. I personally think the OA is, like I said earlier on, it's probably a multi-sig, or I think it's called a Gnosis wallet or something, where it's spread across these 12 God whales. And I think I've identified maybe 5 or 6 of them, thanks to Johnny Chaos. And one of them is this, well, I'm not going to name names because I think that wouldn't be right to do that. People can do their own analysis in that regard. But they're out there, and they are semi-frequently vocal on Twitter and what have you. So I've come to the conclusion, outside of Eric Wall's conclusion, that Richard Hart is the master harp player, that it's probably more likely a multi-sig amongst these, 12 or more individuals. There is the potential for some sort of machine artificial intelligence as well, but I believe that's only been introduced within the last 6 months. So prior to that, I think it was human beings, but it's difficult to say. What is interesting though is that the wallets, so the hodlers, right? When you look at the contract and you look at the amount of hodlers, when I started the investigation, it was 250,000 hodlers. Most of them had 500 airdropped to them. They didn't move, so they were basically they weren't hodlers, they were just random addresses that got airdropped or spammed HEX. And during the course of my investigation, that number jumped by 100,000. So 100,000 more hodlers came on, apparently. But again, if you look closely, you'll see they all hold, this same airdrop amount, which I think it was 500. Now that's a clever way to, obviously, like as you would know, to raise the perception of
the value or the trading volume of a cryptocurrency on the aggregator sites, and that is touched on in the series as well. CoinMarketCap, Nomics, Yahoo Finance, all these aggregator sites and how they decide to rank certain coins. And I think actually there was a legal, was it Johnny Chaos and some other guys that decided to bring a case to CoinMarketCap about that. I remember, I don't know how that's gone or if it's concluded or what, but they were pissed off that HEX wasn't ranked properly. And again, if you go to Etherscan today, at the beginning of my investigation, it was ranked at number 3, just under Ethereum. Now it's dropped down to number 9 or 10, I think. But there was moments there in my investigation where I would check it and it would be down at 300. So that's a massive, like it's really running up and down the aggregators hexes, which is, I guess, a little bit, unique in that regard. I don't know. I don't trade this stuff. Are you a trader, by the way?
No, I don't trade at all. I love Richard Hart because he has changed my life with his sci-fi books, with the self-help videos. I had a bad time back then, but Richard helped me so much, so I became a fan. And that's when I invested in HEX, and I staked out long-term with an average staking duration of 7 years, just like the entire market has. And I want to touch on something that you just mentioned here on CoinMarketCap, because yes, Hexicans are suing CoinMarketCap right now because CoinMarketCap initially is just a middleman as well. It's bought by Binance, one of the biggest centralized exchanges in the world, and they are just showing you what they want you to show correctly. So they're ranking here in a market cap, right? The market cap side. And if we are going to 16, 17, 18, we are seeing a market cap of $5 billion, for example. And there is no HEX to be found on the first page. But if we type in HEX here, for example, we can search where HEX has been on their side. And here it says it is ranked on 201. And if we are going to the market cap here, it is actually $8 billion. And again, if we are going to their own site, like with their own metric, and we look for $8 billion, then HEX should be listed here between 12 and 11, but it's not there. So this is showing that CoinMarketCap is corrupt. They're just showing you whatever they want you to show, whatever they bought first, so you can buy in later when you see it on the site, and now they can dump on your head. And this is why the Hexicans are suing CoinMarketCap. I think that's going to be really interesting once this actually comes out and comes to justice here for sure. So,
but hang on a second. Let's pull up Etherscan, because I think Etherscan it should be a more accurate representation, right?
Exactly. Etherscan is the 100% correct representation of the market cap.
That's a block explorer. That's not an aggregator. So we will get more accurate data from Etherscan. So, and last time I checked, HEX was at 9 or 10th place.
It obviously depends on what is the current price, because all that market cap is really just the supply of a coin times the price, and those two numbers then make the market cap. And then because we are in cryptocurrencies, we burn coins, for example, then we have something that is called a fully diluted market cap, which is all the coins that have ever been in existence. And here's the circulating supply of the market cap, which is a little bit less.
I remember the argument from because the Nomics guys did a big blog post about it as well, like last year. I think it was, or the year before even. And they were in a conundrum about whether or not they should include the staked HEX as circulating supply, right? And that's why they readjusted it down. Do you think staked HEX should be considered circulating supply?
It's a big argument. I'm saying that staked HEX should be considered as supply as well, because Satoshi Nakamoto's coins, for example, he has a lot of them. They have never been moved, and they are counted as well, and they represent the same as staked supply in HEX. So I would say, yes, staked supply should be in there as well. And in this case, HEX would be even ranked higher. So right now, Nomics is ranking HEX at 17. At one point, it was way higher, and they have devalued HEX because they made the argument, well, stake HEX, let's put that out. It just shows that this middleman, they show you what they want to show you. It is really subjective what they're doing, even though cryptocurrency is all about data and all about being objective. So Tom and Peter Gillespie, now I'm coming to the last two questions, and those last two questions that really explain why the hexagons and the time value of money has changed my view on crypto entirely. And if you guys find the stream interesting, please leave a like and subscribe, and also put in your question for Tom Peter Gillespie that we can then ask after I'm done asking my two questions here. So let's see. The first question that I want to ask, it has to do with Eric Wall. Eric Wall said that it is hard to prove decentralization if you can't read code. At the end, we need people like him or Richard Hart to tell us what is good and bad in crypto. That's where my brain exploded. We need a middleman. So I rather want to listen to Richard Hart as a middleman who made a coin that went up 10,000x, who changed my life with his self-help books and videos, compared to Eric Wall, who missed the biggest opportunity of a lifetime. So this was really one of the big things. What do you think about Eric Wall saying that it is hard to prove decentralization? Because you were on the hunt of what is decentralization. You said it is a spectrum. Can you tell us more about decentralization? And if we need a middleman to tell us if it's good or bad cryptocurrency.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on where you're entering crypto, at which entrance you're coming into the space. But like I said before, the way that media talk about decentralization is very binary, and it's inaccurate. But one of the things that stuck with me the most when it comes to the questions of decentralization was an interview there at Decentral in Miami with a fella called he was the guy from the Secret Network now, Wurtzel. He mentioned that there was not enough education around the risks of centralization in the crypto community. So everybody is talking about this utopian vision or idea of peer-to-peer transfer and no middlemen and decentralization and everything, but nobody's actually talking to why those things are important or why they are something to aim for. And obviously, anybody who's lived in the regular economy for more than 30 years will have seen why decentralization has some useful aspects to it, right? Talking about the 2008 and the various housing bubbles that go on around the world. So it's a question of transparency. A technology like blockchain that claims such fundamental value propositions as immutability, transparency, decentralization, etc., is having a hard time actually proving those value propositions in a way that can accurately be understood by regular folk. And I think that's why primarily all new adoption comes through those people that want to speculate on the increase in value of these digital assets, right? Traders, day traders, and what have you. That's entirely driving all the adoption, which is a tragedy basically, because obviously you just end up with these booms and busts and these cycles which we see in the regular economy. So nothing new has happened here apart from it's just been the volume's been turned up, the velocity of crashes is increased, in the amount of projects that can crash in rug and what have you is increased. So all we have is a little bit like what we've always had in the regular capitalist economy in the real world, just sort of increased in volume and velocity, which is arguably is not a great improvement on what we already have, because if you have a shitstorm already, there's no, you don't want a faster, more larger shitstorm. You'd rather have diminish the shitstorm if you can, not increase the size. And I think that's what you have with crypto at the moment. It's probably going to take, I'd argue, another couple of decades at least another decade. What are we? Yeah, we're about a decade in. Another 10 years, you might start to see some of this DeFi stuff come good. You know, once all the shit's been rinsed out and everything's. And I'm not saying that regulators are going to fix that. I think regulators are just another middleman. But that said, there are ways, from what I understand, to embed regulation into smart contract behavior, right? Because if we go back to the fundamental idea of programmable money, which is really that's all there is, right? All of this is programmable money. It's a type of programmable money. You're just injecting logic and behavior into certain digital assets so they behave in certain ways and do certain things at certain times. It's very, very straightforward. And I think that's where we'll have to arrive at. Not only will you have to decide how the value behaves, but you also will have to embed some sort of tax codes or regulatory behavior into the smart contracts as well in the future. And that's up to the governments to try to catch up. You know, they'll need a whole new wing of government with hundreds of developers just to figure out how to ingest all this madness that's coming. And it is madness, because if everyone can program their own value, you know, what does that actually mean for society long term?
I think it's going to be beautiful. We're going to live in a multi-blockchain world. Everybody will be programming his own money, and then only the best ones will do 10,000x. And this is exactly my point. I've realized, and that's probably not what you have intended at all, that Richard Hart is the best person in crypto who has understood exactly how to play the game, who even used the scam narrative for his advantage and makes everybody rich. And this is exactly the reason why we are all in crypto. We buy an asset, then we hold long term, and we hope that the price goes up. And at the end, we will tell our neighbors about this great achievement that we did. And then, you know, we will find mass adoption. Mass adoption is really everything that cryptocurrency is looking for. And maybe then in the future, like you said, in the next decade, we will reach a good DeFi product that is decentralized. Maybe with Pulsechain around the corner, we will have something like that. So, and then the next part.
You hang on a second, but you do realize that by introducing staking, the responsibility is taken away from the individual and put upon on a third party, which in this case is a smart contract, which the individual decides to interact with or not. And in doing so, you take that responsibility away from the individual. Do you not see a risk in that?
No, I don't see a risk in it at all, because look, right now I can take a piece of paper and I can draw a pony picture on this piece of paper. Now I go to my neighbor and I sell it for $1 billion and he will buy it from me. Right now I made my own value. And how to bring it back to cryptocurrency, to staking HEX especially, is there is a code that is written completely with no admin keys. It is a finished product that I can look at and I can put in my HEX and stake it, and then at the end I get my pony picture back and I can sell it. You see, so there is value that I can derive from the code. And
I understand why some people would need to do that. For example, if somebody was having problems like with a gambling addiction, right? They would give their money to their mum and say, "Mum, can you hold on to my money because I keep spending it at the fucking casino, right? And I need to stop doing that. So can you hold on to it and give me it when I need to buy food or go to the cinema or whatever it is?" So what you've done is you've taken the responsibility off yourself and you've put it on your mum. And this is analogous to staking, as far as I can see. You've decided that I don't trust myself to not gamble with this, so I'm going to give it to a third party, which in this case is my mother, and she'll give it back to me, you know, with a reward. Maybe she'll give me a bag of popcorn or something because I was a good boy and I didn't spend it at the casino. There's an analogy here that is useful to think about, because at the end of the day, if you go back to Richard's Scribe stuff, his betterment content. He's all about sort of empowering the individual, right? Instilling I've read some of it, and actually I'll be on this a Wild SJ's stream in March on International Women's Day, and she is very much into this scribe stuff from Richard as well. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll take a look at this. So what I'm getting at is, don't you think that? And I think Eric actually pulled it up in the documentary. He mentioned it as well, where if you aren't able to, say, no, I will just put my, I'll just park my assets or whatever it is myself, and I don't need to be penalized for accessing them at a later date or too early or what have you. That's a bigger responsibility placed upon the individual than relying on a smart contract for HEX or your mother for your gambling addiction. So what I'm getting at is the fundamental value proposition is the idea that you can't trust yourself. So you have to trust another mechanism to help you get to where you need to go.
Well, I think the value really comes from staking is that if you hold the HEX by yourself, then you don't generate more HEX. And you can just look at this code, and this code says that 3.69% inflation occurs, and this inflation is only given to the people who stake. Now, you are using this mechanism to generate more HEX in the future. And of course, here we all speculate that those HEX will be more worth in the future. So for me, it is a great tool to stake HEX and generate my own wealth, because I decide myself how long do I want to stake. And I made the birthday staking ladder, for example. Every year for my birthday, I have HEX coming out for the next 15 years. So my life is basically set. I do not have to work anymore. I don't have to worry anymore. Now I can help empower the people like Richard Hart is talking about in his sci-fi books and videos. And this is where SJ is coming in. She does the audiobooks for the sci-fi. It's also helping a lot of other hexicans out there. And I think this was a great and fundamental part of Richard Hart's success, because he was able to build this community and then introduced HEX, and everybody saw how great it is. And now he used this scam narrative to pull in even more people. And with pull chain, I think we will find even greater adoption. So I'm really interested to see. And this all leads into the next question with Ben Goertzel, who is a cognitive scientist and artificial intelligence researcher. And he said it doesn't have to be only one cult per decentralized network. And that's where I really opened my eyes. I can build my own culture, my own cult, and have my own followers in this world. That's where I decided to not be a Hex maxi anymore. So can you explain a little bit more what he meant by that, and what he really wanted to transpire during saying that you can have your own cult in a cult, for example?
Yeah, again, I'm dropping all the the full interviews, the uncut interviews via the bitjoinery.com to help resource out the next production. And Goertzel's interview is a bloody good one as well. But we were digging, we were digging heavily into the decentralization stuff there, because obviously I did find some footage of him and Richard together, but I didn't, I think, like I said at the beginning of the investigation, I was trying to find those guys that were really into HEX and those guys that were not, and then this middle ground. And I think I found that middle ground with Goertzel, actually. And so that's where the whole decentralization stuff ties up quite nicely in a bow. And when he says that it doesn't have to be one cult per decentralized network, I think what he's referring to, and then what I've learned along the way, was that obviously you have, it's clearly identifiable in HEX as well. You have the staker class, for example. You have various subgroups of the broader community that have, arguably more power than others, right? And again, this is not just HEX. This is all different types of crypto projects. But I think that's what he was referencing. And not only that, the idea that you might have a bunch of subcults within a larger, broader cult, but new cults are also able to introduce themselves, whether they are appreciated or not, right? Which is kind of interesting to observe. I saw that happen over the investigation period as well, with the introduction of these other projects, which I assume were birthed internally, but may have come externally as well. For example, the Hedron, there was a big Hedron drama as well, because people didn't want to allow people to sell their stakes or something. There was some controversy around that. So yeah, that's what I interpret Goetzel's suggestion when he talks about multiple subcults within a broader, like a larger cult. If that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I will elaborate on that a little bit. So first of all, like, this documentary really made me realize crypto is all a narrative, and I want to follow the narrative of Richard Hart of printing money, becoming wealthy, and then, you know, empowering the world. So even though I became like, it moved on from a maximalist to not a maximalist, it made me realize I want to follow Richard Hart, and I'm now more motivated than ever to do so, because I realized that he is the best person in crypto. And then because of Ben Goetzel, I decided to, you know, basically start my own cult. And if you guys want to follow my cult, then just follow and subscribe, like the video, and then you can see my interpretation of cryptocurrency and how to find this financial freedom.
That's interesting. I also started a cult recently. It's not a cult. I call it a collective. It's basically how I'm going to resource future productions. You may have
tell us more about it. I've seen that, and now starting a cult is the new thing to do. So tell me more about this collective, and how I understood this is the new way for you to go forward with investigations in the future, right?
Yeah, exactly. So if you think about how a production works, you would know better than most, being a documentary producer yourself. You obviously have, you know, you've got certain levels where certain individual talents come in and play certain parts. So pre-production, production, post-production mainly. And you know, up to this date, with the fake influencer and the Hexkins doco, I've been doing large part of that stuff myself, along with Tomo and Tommy when they were made available, and the guys at BitJoint Studios as well. So I launched this thing called the Bit Joinery. You can get there via the bitjoinery.com, and I've set up what I believe a very interesting method for crowdsourcing both talent and capital at the same time. So there is. If you watched the documentary, you would have seen there was a QR code. Whenever an interview nameplate came up, there was a QR code, right? If you scan that, you'll go to a page, and there you'll find an NFT. And the NFT is actually an NFM, which is a non-fungible mate, which is what I've created on the BitJoinery Uncut platform there. You mint that, right? I think it's about $8 at the moment. And every time 100 of those are minted, I airdrop a full-length interview from the documentary miniseries to those holders of that token. And so incrementally, as you hit another 100, another interview gets dropped, another 100, and there's 30 interviews, full-length interviews that average about an hour each. At which point, if we get to the very top, which is obviously 3,000 NFTs minted, all 30 interviews have been dropped to those NFT holders. So all the interviews would have been distributed, and at that point, the treasury on the BitJoinery would have, well, what's that? $8 times, whatever $8 times 3,000 is. It's quite a lot of money. It's enough money to kickstart the next production at least. And at the same time, what I've done, which I think is fucking genius, is if anybody in that minting phase has minted 10 or more of those NFTs, they get airdropped a co-producer NFT, which I don't know what I'm going to call it. Maybe, I mean, these are non-fungible mates. I guess I could call it a non-fungible co-producer or something. Anyway, those NFTs are the ones which allow you to allow holders, individual holders, to get involved in the actual next production, like properly involved, as in how the fuck are we going to spend this treasury money? What are we going to invest in? You know, like a proper collective production team who are making decisions to move this fucking thing forward. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that pans out over 2023, right? Because I know for a fact there are people out there that want, you know, they want me to go and investigate this project or that project or whatever. But the question is if they want it that bad, are they willing to come and help me do that? Or are they willing to, you know, fatten up the treasury and make it happen? Because when we're definitely not in short supply of investigations, right? But yeah, I'd be keen to hear what you think of that. Is it too complicated? I think it's pretty simple, right?
I think it's pretty simple. I think you can mobilize a lot of people with that because there is definitely interest in doing that, having investigations of coins in the future. And I think you should be helped with by the community. And if you guys want to watch the documentary Hexicans and the Time Value of Money, here in the video description, you find the link to that. I personally got the password to watch all of those episodes, but now that I hear that there is the NFM, the non-fungible mate, I will go ahead and get me one of those so I can then see all those interviews with Eric Wall, who has basically changed my life and like changed my view on crypto, and Ben Gersel especially. I want to see them, so I will get my non-fungible mates, and if you guys want to do so, you can follow along with those links. Well, Tom Peter Gillespie, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for making this documentary. Thank you so much for you guys being part of this, liking and subscribing and helping me building my own cult, which is not only HEX, but also Hedron, Tom, that you have learned, pulls Bitcoin, pulls Dogecoin, Maxi, the Perpetuals, Icosa. There are so many new projects that I'm talking about it here on my YouTube channel, and I would love you guys to be part of it. Tom Peter Gillespie, last words go to you before we play the outro.
Yeah, I just want to say big thanks for the time that you've spent here with me, and I'm super stoked that you enjoyed the documentary, mate. I'm glad you got something out of it, and you certainly seem to have got the message of which I was trying to portray. So that's good confidence building for the next investigation. And again, if anybody wants to join me on that, thebitjoinery.com is the place to go.
Awesome, Tom. See you very, very soon. Whenever you want to come on the platform, you are definitely invited. Thanks for you guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe and put into the video description, how do you like my outro, for example. See you guys. Bye.
And God only knows what great things we could manage under such conditions. We're becoming incredibly technologically powerful. And what would it be like if we became equally wise? Well, that would really be something. God only knows what we could manage in the next 20 years or the next 100 years, you know? We're running at 40%, most of us, you know, because we're half in and half out. And it's not surprising because life is difficult. It's like, well, what if you were 90% in or 95% in or all in? Because you're all in anyways, right? It's a life and death game. No one gets out of this. Everyone dies. You might as well commit yourself. And you might as well commit yourself to the highest good that you can attain, because why not? It'll imbue your life with meaning. It's hard, the responsibility's there, but all the meaning's in the responsibility. And that'll make your life better. It'll make your family's life better. And it should make your culture better. Maybe it make the world better. It's like, that'll justify your damn miserable existence at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're wondering what the hell you're doing here. And that's a good thing, because there's going to be days when you're aching and tired and sore, and there's people in your family that are sick, and you're cynical and bitter, and you need a reason to get up, and you think, yeah, well, a little more heaven and a little less hell, maybe I can pull that off today and tomorrow and next week. And that's worth struggling forward for.